नमस्ते, स्वागत है आपका इंडिया दिस वीक के एक नए एपिसोड में और मैं हूं आपकी होस्ट आमना अंसारी. So today we have invited Mr. Wasiq. Wasiq is a very well-known public intellectual. Most of us do follow him on Twitter and do enjoy his commentary over there. He is a counter-extremist analyst focusing on the matter of international security. He also writes for UK-based think tank, and he has a PhD degree in war studies, and also a trustee in Muslim Against Anti-Semitism. So welcome, Wasiq.
Thank you, Amina.
Yeah, we are very happy that you are today on our channel. So because we keep introducing liberal Muslims and who can give a different perspective to our viewers. So you are the one of them, and we are very proud of to have you here. So Wasiq, let's start from here. I would like you to introduce yourself, like what kind of work you do, what kind of idea you believe in. So please let our viewers know about it.
Well, first of all, thank you, Amina, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. I think it's one of the best ones to come out of Bharat currently. You guys obviously look at some of the detail and some of the nuance that seems to be missed in the commentary. Now, I'm British. I was born in Pakistan. I came here when I was 2 years old. I integrated here as a result of being brought up here. I came here with the rest of my family, and I've spent the rest of my life here. And that's made me British. And I haven't known any other identity other than being British, as well as also my Muslim faith. So I am a devotee Muslim, so I pray 5 times a day. I give to charity. I observe Ramadan, and also go on to the pilgrimages as well. And obviously I subscribe to the Shahada, which is the declaration of faith. Now, in terms of being British for me, I know you obviously introduced me as a liberal Muslim. I don't try to put any labels on me. I find sometimes that labels could be limiting or may not accurately capture one's identity. But I do subscribe to liberal values. And that's as a result of being here. Perhaps if I was brought up somewhere else, I may not have, who knows, but I am where I am, and I believe in what I believe. And it also includes also enlightenment values. I believe in freedom of speech, freedom of religion. I believe in the freedom to just leave people alone as well, because what we find sometimes, particularly in the West, we're starting to find that a lot, is that people are restricted from being able to do or say anything due to the potential harm that it could cause to others, because they might get offended or such and such. Now, I've been, I came here in the 80s, and, that's quite some time ago now. And I've seen a lot. I've seen how the British Muslim community has evolved over that time. I've seen how some elements of the British Muslim community have also regressed in that time as well. So we've seen some progression, we've seen some regression, and this is probably natural to find in perhaps other places such as Bharat as well. Whereas you may not get as much immigration coming in, but you certainly get some of that immigration, so people immigrating out from there to other places. But in terms of my own journey as a Muslim, what I found was that for me, the UK is the best place to be as a Muslim. I have the freedom to go to the mosque. I have the freedom to pray 5 times a day, to read the Quran. No one's preventing me from doing it. And I also have the freedom to critique other religions if I so wish to do so. And additionally, that for me is what being British is about. But there is a big but here, and that but is that there are people within our British Muslim community. And the caveat that I do put in here always when I talk about the British Muslim community is that it's a diverse community. We're not all the same. We don't all come from the same regions around the world. Some people were, came from the subcontinent, others came from the Middle East or Africa. And then you have people who were born and brought up here who are also Muslim. So there's a lot of diversity in the British Muslim community, but there are some nefarious, mischievous characters within our community who seek to use their identity to prevent people from critiquing Islam or Muslims who carry out acts of extremism or terrorism. And for me, this goes against the principal values or British values that we have of freedom of speech or the rule of law and things like that. And for me, this spearheaded something in me, and it helped me to seek to try and challenge some of this, because for me, what I want, or at least a vision, is for Muslims in Britain to fully integrate. They don't have to assimilate 100%, because we have our own non-negotiables. For example, many Muslims here do not subscribe to drinking alcohol, so there's no need to drink alcohol to be a British Muslim. There's no need to wear a hijab or not wear a hijab to be a Muslim, because as far as I'm concerned, and in my view, to be a Muslim, you just subscribe to the Shahada, the declaration of faith. There is one God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger. And so for that, that's it. That's your base. That's your starting point. Anything after that, it's left between you and God. Anyone else who seeks to get involved in that, they're basically a middleman. And in Islam, we don't have the concept of middlemen. Nobody can intercede on your behalf between you and God. It's a matter between you and God. But of course, when you have something so liberating like that, there are people who want to obviously seek to limit that liberalization and to limit what you can say, can do, in order for them to control you. And for me, that's a big problem, because why, in my view, why are British Muslims being treated differently to other members of other religious groups or no religious groups? And why aren't they facing the same thing? They shouldn't be facing the same thing, but there's a reason why they're not facing it, but we are. And it's because we have a cancerous element within our community. These nefarious, mischievous characters who I, call out, in my view, that they are Islamists who seek to do this. And for me, this is a problem. And this is what helped me to get into kind of this sort of work that I do, challenging them, whether it's through debate, whether it's through writing, whether it's through commentary, getting platforms such as your excellent podcast, and things like that. So it's a big problem that we face here. And I'm sure there are other regions around the world who also face these sorts of similar challenges.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a hot topic even in the world, like how Muslims should get integrated in any particular country. And also, when we talk about this particular issue, we sometimes lose the nuances. So some people want to put their own condition, like these things you have to follow. And then there is Islamists who want to be very rigid about it, that no, everything about your country and values should change according to our condition. And in this, between the normal Muslim people, lost their way to navigate like what we should do and what we should not do. I totally agree with that. So I mean, you have explained very well the British value and British Muslim, what it is. But I want to add further question. Like, you are a devotee Muslims, you are very practicing Muslim. Basically, you pray 5 times, you believe in Allah and everything. So a lot of people, and also you do believe in liberal values, democratic values and British values. So a lot of people bring this argument that it is not possible to be both simultaneously. So what is your argument there? And also this can apply to Bharat, India as well, because the same argument people bring for the Indian Muslims, that to be a good Indian, you have to have not live, but you should not be a very devotee Muslim. That's then only it's possible. So how do you see this entire argument?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a fallacious argument in my view. I'm living proof that you can be a devotee, a devout Muslim, and to also have a British identity. But let's start from the base of this. Now, Islam, there's no one version of Islam. Let's just put that out there now, and to make that very clear, there are many different types of Islam out there. There are some core principles, of course, that we all have. This are non-negotiables. So, whether it's the 5 pillars, the Shahada, that we do have those non-negotiables. But everything apart from that is left to everyone else to interpret. The religion of Islam in the UK is practiced very much differently to the religion of Islam in the Middle East. And again, even in the Middle East, there is so much diversity in how it's practiced. And then it's also very much different in Bharat and Pakistan as well. So there is no one version of Islam, because if there was one version of Islam, then we wouldn't have so many sects either. A sect is, in the Christian terminology, a denomination within Islam. So denominations in Christianity, you would have obviously things like the Jehovah's Witnesses, or you would have Catholics or Protestants, so on and so forth. In Islam, Sunni Islam or Sunni Muslims are the biggest denomination. Then you got Shia, you got Ismailis, you got Ahmadis. So you've got so much diversity in there. So the first thing is that there's no one version of Islam. So when people are saying to you that you cannot be Muslim and you cannot be British, well, I don't know which Islam they're talking about, because they're certainly not talking about my Islam. That's the first thing that I'd like to say. If they're talking about their own Islam, then that's fine. They've got a problem that they need to deal with, if they even consider it a problem. Second of all, in terms of Bharat, one of the points that I think needs to be made is Bharat is not a secular country, it has a secular state. There is a distinction between the two. Bharat as a country has very much a Hindu character to it that can incorporate people of other faiths and of no faiths. In terms of the people of no faiths, like the atheists, for example, this also includes Hindu atheists as well. So sometimes I think that gets missed. So when we think about Hinduness, or at least in terms of Bharat and the Hindu character, that doesn't have to be a religious character itself. It could also be a cultural, civilizational thing. Which is why if it can accommodate atheist Hindus, then it has the capacity to also accommodate Jews, Christians, Sikhs, and most importantly, Muslims. So there is no conflict there. How could there be a conflict? You are free to practice your religion. There are mosques that are there, and you are not being persecuted for being a Muslim or for practicing your faith. And it's exactly the same thing here in the UK. We have freedom of religion, and we can practice our faith. We have mosques here. We can even register the mosques as charity. So we get so many benefits as a result of that. So when people are, again, bringing up this argument that there is a difference or there's a conflict between the two identities, actually, I don't think there is. The reality is very much different. Now, there is obviously an implication to this. And, when it's being presented that there's a conflict between the two identities, then there has to be some sort of solution. Okay. And so, in my view, Islamists, I should really actually do this. And I tend to do this when I go on to these podcasts, is that what I'd first like to do is define what Islamism is, and then what Islamists are. So Islamism essentially is a political ideology. It's not a religion. It's a political ideology that seeks to implement Islam into public life. So through law, through policy, through institutions, so on and so forth. So what they're hoping to do is take the private rulings, the Sharia, which is the way of doing things, and apply it to the public. And anyone who subscribes to that ideology is therefore by definition an Islamist. So if you're being accused of an Islamist, it's not necessarily a slur or you're not, it's not necessarily there to offend you. It's there to provide a description of an ideology that you perhaps subscribe to, or at least subscribe to in the round where you meet the threshold of meeting that definition. So those are the two things. Now, when you have those two conflicting identities, or at least that's how it's being presented, then Islamists will want to then present a solution. And for them, the solution is that if the country can't accommodate Muslims and their identity because there's a conflict, then we need to set up our own. And what they mean by that is not a country. They're hoping to set up a caliphate, an Islamic state ruled under Sharia, so they get to have the benefits of being a Muslim within the Sharia, within that caliphate, and propose that as a solution. But the fact is, Amina, when ISIS set up their caliphate in Iraq and Syria, only 900 British people from the UK went and traveled there to join them. And that's out of a potential 3 million pool of people. I don't think that argument is winning from the terrorists, the ISIS, the Islamists, the violent and non-violent Islamists on that side, that there's a clash. In fact, there isn't a clash. 900 out of a potential 3 million isn't exactly a ringing endorsement for this so-called solution to this conflicting identity.
Right. I think also I would like to add here, people need to or should understand the difference between a practicing Muslim, an Islamist, or a jihadist, or a terrorist, because a lot of times we see people use these terms in interchangeable way, which is not right, and that only bring more problem to the table only. So we talked about the identity, and we just saw a few days back there was a clash between two identity, Muslim and Hindu, in Leicester. So you were very vocal about that also. So can you tell a little bit about the incident and what is your finding?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of what happened in Leicester, so Leicester is an East Midlands town in the United Kingdom. A few months ago in May, there was allegations that a Muslim man, I think, was assaulted by Hindu men, and that was the starting blocks for what subsequently happened after that. So towards the end of August, we found that India had beaten Pakistan in the cricket, and naturally people were out there celebrating on the streets as they normally do. I think whenever it's Eid or Vaisakhi or Diwali, people are always out on the streets celebrating. It's very much a British thing to do. So in fact, that just goes back to the whole point of there's no conflict necessarily between the two identities. And so when these things happen, people get a little bit excited. Some people were drinking, some people ended up drinking a bit too much. And one individual had drunk too much and started to get into a few scuffles with people. And as a result of that, obviously there was a bit of fighting, a bit of violence that happened. And this was being recorded on people's smartphones, and then they were sharing it in WhatsApp groups, they're sharing it on social media, things like that. So with all these things happening, conspiracy theories begin to build up. So people, because there's no background information to what was happening, how it happened, why it happened, people make up their own stories. They make up their own stories because there is an epistemic need for them to do such a thing. And the reason why there's an epistemic need is because it tends to be that they cannot trust mainstream media to tell the truth. And so they go to alternative sources of information to get that information, to then either do two things. One is to stabilize their own narrative within themselves, so they feel like they're taking control of a whole pool of misinformation that's out there. And the second reason is that they do it for confirmation bias. And confirmation bias for me is one of the biggest problems, because if you've got a bunch of Muslims or a bunch of Hindus or a bunch of Sikhs or whoever it is who don't like a particular group, so it could be again a bunch of Muslims, a bunch of Hindus, or a bunch of Sikhs. They're just looking for anything to confirm their belief in order to hate these people even more. And this is exactly what was happening with that thing, because I believe the person who was drinking and, you know, got into a fight with everyone wasn't even Muslim himself. So the idea that he was a Muslim and he was being attacked by Hindus after the victory over Pakistan by India seems to be palpable to me. Okay, so that happened. Now, because a lot of this misinformation was being circulated, this then helped Islamists, for example, who wanted to turn what seemed to be a conflict between two nations, or not even two nations, two groups of people who support two nations, into one of a religious one. So it's now not about India and Pakistan, it's actually about Hindu and Muslim. Okay, so that's exactly what, in my view, what they were doing. And you can see that quite clearly, because they're not talking about India and they're not talking about Pakistan. They're talking about Hindus, they're talking about Muslims, they're talking about Hindutva, but they're not talking about Islamists. And we'll get to the point of not talking about Islamists in a second. So this is the key point that they were trying to do, is that they wanted to change the narrative, that from one small thing like that, it's now become an existential threat for Muslims or an existential threat for Hindus. And that's it. We need to obviously fight against this in some way. But it wasn't until Islamists from outside of the city of Leicester came in and started to insert themselves and try to assert themselves as some sort of guardians of the Muslims. So we saw Islamists coming from London, we saw Islamists coming from Birmingham, who were all coordinating themselves with each other. And that's quite frightening, because what it shows is that they were able to mobilize themselves very easily, very quickly. And it also shows that there were regional networks of Islamists working with each other. So all they needed to do was manufacture a problem and create the solution. And their solution was that we are the solution, Islamists are the solution, we're here to help you, because the police at the time weren't able to do anything. Now, you got to remember, you had around 200 to 300, it seemed like, Hindu men go out and do an unplanned march. In my view, that was a mistake. You don't go and do things like that. You need to get that cleared by the police. By not doing that, you gave the Islamists exactly what they needed. They needed to feel like they were being provoked into having to defend themselves against a threat, when clearly that wasn't the case, because it wasn't until those Islamists came out and clashed with that group of 200 to 300 so-called Hindu men or Hindutva men that anything actually happened. But then it also spilled over into the West Midlands town of Smethwick, where they again manufactured another problem. So they had a prominent Hindu speaker at a temple who was meant to come there and to present, or to, speak there. But it had got cancelled, but that was irrelevant. The fact that the Hindu temple had invited them in the first place meant that the Islamists felt that this Hindu temple was already an enemy of Muslims, because they had already invited someone who they perceived to be hostile to Muslims. And this is exactly what happened. So they obviously went there. Again, they were causing trouble, making anti-Hindu remarks. The same thing happened in Leicester, happened in Smethwick. And these sorts of things just kept happening and happening. And the police weren't able, in my view, law enforcement were not able to do anything about it in a proportional, appropriate manner that could actually, neutralize it, which then allowed the Islamists to feel like they could do something. So that's kind of my take on it. I know that there's some reviews that are looking to be done. I know that there's been a lot of media reporting on it, but the fact is we don't know all the facts, and it's too soon yet to know anything. And we probably might not know anything until at least 12 months, until we definitely know all the facts and we're able to analyze all the data and come to a more considered conclusion.
So basically, there are too many gaps to come to any conclusion right now. So also, as you were saying, that Islamists can manufacture a conflict to show that Muslims are under attack, and then they can use that conflict for their own profit, right? That's a lot we see in India as well. And my question is that how powerful Islamists are in Britain, how big problem they are, or it is an exaggerated version that they are very big problem. Also, we do listen a lot about the Sharia, private Sharia institution going on in the Britain, despite it is not allowed by the secular government, right? It's not secular state, but the state doesn't allow to have your personal law, right? Or am I missing something there?
No, that's correct. We have just UK law, yeah.
Yeah. So how it is possible that people are following Sharia here, which is actually very discriminative against the women. And back in India, we do have officially personal law board. So Muslim women has to bear it, and we are fighting against it. Basically, I am very vocal in fighting against it. And I'm hoping this Hindutva government, which get abused a lot, but I only have hope from them that they can bring the UCC, so Muslim women can also enjoy the equal rights. So how bad it is, the Islamism thing in Britain?
Well, I do think it's quite bad. I think they pose a threat in very many ways. They pose it. Okay, so for your viewers' attention, there are, when we talk about Islamists, so we're not talking about a homogenous bloc. We're actually talking, there is some diversity in Islamists. There are three types of Islamists. There are the violent type, who are like the ISIS, the Al-Qaeda, the Boko Haram, Tariq-i-Taliban, Jamaat-i-Islami, those sorts of people. Those are violent Islamists who have the same aim as, as each other, and they use violence to achieve it. Okay, so that's our first threat. In terms of the UK, we've been facing that threat for over nearly 2 decades now, since at least the 2005 bombings. That we had 52 people killed, hundreds injured as a result of that. And then after that, almost every other year, we had a terrorist attack from Islamists. So we know that we have a threat from them. You have then the non-violent Islamists. So they're no different to the violent Islamists, other than they don't use violence to achieve their aim. So they try to obviously use intimidation, threats, cancel culture, things like that as a way to achieve their aims. And then you've got the last one, which is participationist Islamists. Participationist Islamists are the ones who are basically your Islamists dressed up in suits. Okay, so they wear a tie, they wear a shirt and tie, nice blazer, they'll comb their hair, might even be clean shaven, they will look like they are fully integrated into British society. And so much so that in terms of their integration, they don't even see necessarily a conflict with secular law and Islamic law. So instead of trying to change the law, what they're trying to do is make the law Sharia compliant. A very distinct difference here. Okay, they don't want to set up a caliphate ruled under Sharia. They just want to make Britain or the West or any other country where they can't set up a caliphate, they want to make it Islam friendly and Muslim focused. Okay, so they want it to be Sharia compliant, in other words. One of the ways that they make Sharia compliant, all three of them, is through the use of blasphemy. Now, in the UK, we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of belief. So you can believe what you want and also not believe what you want. Okay, no one is going to reprimand you as a result of that. But also, you can say what you want or not say what you want about almost anything, providing it's within the law. Okay, so as long as you're not inciting hatred or inciting violence or, inciting racism or anything like that.
Basically, we have freedom of speech, but Islamists are the one who will who will put the limitation on it, and they have a power to do this, right?
Yeah.
That's actually happening, I think, around the world. If it is a Muslim majority country, we already know what is the condition of freedom of speech. And if it is not, then they have other mean to control that, which is very, very sad thing. And I think Muslim like us, the Muslim who believe in a religion, in a way to connect the Allah to the God, but not to politicize our faith. We are the only answer. That's what I believe. We will be the first front to fight against them. Right. So, I mean, now what I want to talk, it is a very different issue rather than all these issues we were discussing. So you also work against anti-Semitism, right? So what do you think? Do you feel that Muslim community has a very strong problem of this, and we are not enough speaking about this issue, or you think there is some kind of progress going on?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. There's definitely an issue of anti-Semitism within the Muslim community, and obviously that's a diverse community. It's not all Muslims are anti-Semitic. I would certainly say all Islamists are probably anti-Semitic. The anti-Semitism that we face here, or the Jewish community face here in Britain from some Islamists or some Muslims, is usually stems from the belief that the nation state of Israel shouldn't exist, because they see the nation state of Israel as an existential threat to Palestinians. So lots of Muslims here in Britain subscribe to the plight of Palestinians, and they're more than justified in doing so, because sometimes the way Palestinians are treated is horrendous. Most of the times when they're treated horrendously, it's by their own government. But that doesn't seem to be at the highest point. And that's the problem, highest point of debate, because that's the problem. When you're not critiquing the Palestinian government enough, and instead focusing so much of your attention on the nation state of Israel, then you can see that actually the problem isn't necessarily the plight of the Palestinians. The problem is more so, how can we attack Israel, Jews, or Zionists as a way of asserting our identity as Muslims or Islamists, and that's a problem. And so we set up, myself and a few other colleagues, we set up a charity known as Muslims Against Anti-Semitism, because we recognized that there was a problem here. But we also recognized that we as Muslims need to stand up to this. And we have a lot of support from Muslims. And it just goes to show that actually not all Muslims are anti-Semitic, because obviously not all Muslims are anti-Semitic. That would just be, bigotry towards a diverse community that no sensible person should be engaging in. So I wouldn't necessarily engage in that. And I'm sure you wouldn't either. But some idiots will obviously do that and claim all Muslims are anti-Semitic, when that's certainly not the case. But it just goes to show we have lots of Muslims who support us, because they recognize also that there is a problem within our community. It's not just obviously towards Jews that we see this hostility. It could be towards anyone. We've seen recently in Leicester that the Hindutva bogeyman has been given life to, and now there's so much focus on that. And because Hindutva for many Hindus means Hinduness, it means then that a lot of Hindus who would normally say we're Hindutva now won't say it, because if they do, then they become legitimate targets for these people. So there is a problem. We are here to tackle it. And the only way that we can tackle it is if we bring it out into the public and debate it, find out what's going on, why is it going on, how can we obviously tackle it in a sensible, proportionate and appropriate way.
Right. So it's a very, how to put it, it's a very learning experience to listen to you. So I get a very good idea about Britain and how Islamism is playing a role in Britain and how sensible Muslims are fighting against it as well. So my last question would be about Bharat. So I'm seeing nowadays you interact a lot of Indian people on the Twitter, and I think you are only Twitter, not other platform, right?
Mhm.
So, what is your view about the Bharat? What is that you are learning about India, and you find very interesting, or any comment from your side?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, look, I'm Pakistani by birth. At one point, Pakistan was part of Bharat, so I consider myself to be of both identities, as well as being British and as well as being as Muslim. You can't necessarily dispense with some of these identities if you've been brought up in them. So um, I've learned a lot from some of the Indian or the Hindus from Bharat who are teaching me a lot about Hinduism, who are teaching me a lot about Hindutva ideology, even the bad stuff, mostly the good stuff, some of the bad stuff, and how it can be manipulated by some people to push a nefarious agenda, because not everyone's perfect, and no one would ever disagree with that. So I learn a lot from it. I've even managed to go to a Garba and take part in Navratri, which is fantastic, and and I think we need to see more of that, because by going to these sorts of things and interacting with other communities, whether they're of a different religion or not, helps you to understand, helps you to empathize with them, and to really gain that cognizance of what people are like outside of your immediate bubble. And until we start doing things like that, then you will end up creating these own conspiracy theories within yourselves and think, well, all Hindus are like this, or all Muslims are like that, or all Jews are like that, or whatever it is. So you end up learning a lot. Even when we look at Bharat, it's a civilizational land that's not secular, but it has a secular state. So there are those distinctions that need to be made. But then you've also got this weird personal law there. That's, for me, in my view, that's a ticking time bomb, because I know recently you've had this debate in terms of the hijab row, where can or should schoolgirls be allowed to wear the hijab in secular school, but then if you reverse that problem and say, okay, if that's the case, they can wear that in secular school, can a woman in a miniskirt come into a mosque? Neither of them are then proposed as appropriate, and so there needs to be better discussions there. Obviously, there's a court ruling on that, which is a split decision, so it's going up to the higher court. So it should be interesting to see. So there are obviously lots of issues there, and most of the issues that you guys are facing there, we're facing here in the West, and most of the issues we're facing here, you guys are facing there in Bharat. So there's a lot to learn there. Obviously, I'm learning a lot. I hope many in Bharat are learning from me in terms of my experience here in the West. But it's fantastic. I mean, I haven't really received any hostility from any Muslim, Hindu, Sikh from Bharat. In fact, I get lots of compliments, and they're just very nice people, which is how it should be. But they're also concerned about the Islamist threat that you have there. I think a few months ago there was a tailor who had who was butchered to death by two Islamists because he showed support to a BJP spokesman who had said something problematic. And this is ridiculous, but this is where we're at. You say something that offends someone and they go out and kill you. And that's what I mean. We have those shared experiences. We had something like that actually happen in France. France is 30 miles away from the UK over the Dover port. So it's not that far away, and someone was butchered to death there. A teacher, in fact, for doing or saying something against Muslim or Islamist orthodoxy and Islam. So these problems we face are similar, but I've learned so much from those in Bharat, and I'm really grateful to them.
Thank you to listen that, and you're welcome to India. I would love to host you someday. And the one thing I want to add here, like, it's a very sad thing that Muslims even don't realize that there is no concept of blasphemy, at least no physical punishment. It's nowhere written in Quran. And a lot of Islamic scholar, like the Islamic scholar who had received Indian Padma Bhushan also, it's a highest civilian award, Wahiduddin Khan has clearly stated that the blasphemy is not a subject of physical punishment. It is a subject of intellectual discussion. If you do not like something, you have to rebut it. You are offended by some idea, so bring some counter narrative to it instead of going all the violent way. So I think these kind of debate we need to bring within the Muslim fold. So thank you very much, Wasiq, for your time. It was lovely talking to you, and hopefully you will come again and again on our podcast and share your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amina.
Yeah. Also, to my viewers, प्लीज लाइक सब्सक्राइब कीजिए और शेयर कीजिए, ऑल्सो कमेंट कीजिए, और आपको क्या अच्छा लगा क्या नहीं अच्छा लगा वो भी मैं बता सकते हैं, या फिर आप नेक्स्ट एपिसोड के लिए कौन सा सब्जेक्ट चाहते हैं कि हम कवर करें वो भी लिख सकते हैं. थैंक यू. नमस्ते.